Hello, I want to talk a little bit more about guilt. Okay, we have to understand some semantics here. All right, there's ideas of guilt that are general, ideas of regret that are general. You could call that feeling you feel guilt or regret, and there's many other terms. Okay, and I am taking upon myself to separate these out. That there's different kinds of regret. And to me, the term regret is the more general of the two between regret and guilt. And I think there's a lot of ways to feel regret or guilt, if you wanted to call it that. Lots of ways to feel it and to act on it. And I'm associating a certain reaction to the raw feeling. And I'm calling the raw feeling regret. And maybe there should even be some other term. And I'm calling this more complex reaction to it guilt. Now, I think naturally when we feel regret, we've taken some experience where we see that we've done something that we feel culpable for. And the regret kind of is a feeling that makes you want to do something about that. And the question is, with all the different thousand kinds of expression of this feeling, this phenomenon, what do you do about it? And I am calling guilt the kind of reaction to regret that I associate with a Christian sort of regret, a Christian guilt, and where what you do about it is you self-flagellate. You feel bad, you do something bad to yourself, you punish yourself. Okay. And I think there's other kinds of expression of regret that are more positive, where you try to change the world in a positive way. You know, if you knock a stack of bricks off a building and it falls and kills somebody, accidental manslaughter, and you get off but you feel guilty, well, we're talking about you can either just self-flagellate yourself, which to me is a feeling, a fear in the pit of your stomach that you're going to be called on this, have to account for this. Or you could, for example, help out the widow. You know, you could do, or maybe he was single and you go and you do work safety, or you teach the people at your job site to be more safe and you teach them from your lesson, or some positive thing. And I'm associating that with the term regret. Now, in terms of responses to this ITO approach of looking at regret and or guilt, some people have questioned, well, is it really a way of thinking or is it really a feeling? Well, for all I know, it's both things, and, you know, those are just two aspects of them. Perhaps feelings are ways of thinking, you know, in the real world. But in ITO, we do make a distinction because we're talking about the feelings as the input and the way of thinking as the reaction to the input and the production of other feelings. Okay, so even if they are in reality one thing, this is making a discrimination between different qualities, different aspects of those things. So we can use either term, regret or guilt, and we can ask, is it a feeling or is it a way of thinking? Now, if we accept that there's a little bit of both, that there's, you know, a guilty way of thinking and there's a guilty feeling, even if the guilty way of thinking is simply how you think in reaction to guilt, or perhaps how you think that produces guilt, whichever. And, well, we haven't actually brought that up, ways of thinking in which the output is guilt. But we get there. But the thing is, so the guilty way of thinking, reacting to feelings of guilt with the self-flagellation is really just making a distinction there between this way of thinking and the feeling, even if it's just two different tips of the same iceberg. And by doing this, we can start to discriminate and get an idea of these different aspects of an emotion like guilt or regret. Now, back to the end, I just think that guilt as a term is owned by this Christian, religious, especially Christian concept of guilt. You look at, I just read Gandhi's autobiography. You know, there's things in his life that he regretted, and he would do things like go on fasts and try to improve himself from this regret, and it was a terrible burden on him. But I wouldn't call it guilt. And in my own case, when I was younger and felt things more in this way that I'm calling guilt, I found those made me not want to act. Those made me want to hide. Even if I had been found out, I had a feeling of not wanting to be found out, not wanting to talk about it, not wanting to deal with the issue and get past it, learn from it, maybe help others learn from it, you know. And by disclosing that, usually, you know, by confessing and forcing myself into the open, I discovered this other kind of positive regret, not only in myself, but in other people, that other people would do things positive from their own mistakes. And so that's both, the attitude of guilt and what I'm trying to get at with guilt, and why we're looking at other ways of thinking. It's a little bit about, this way of thinking, how do we get the guilt? At first we just see ourselves stepping on a bug, and some way of thinking takes that input and turns it into guilt. And, in a sense, that's what I'm saying is let's go upstream and change this and use some other ways of thinking that produce something besides guilt, because then the guilty way of thinking, the feeling of guilt, which I want to call regret, that take those feelings of regret and then don't produce, inaction and inactivity and self-flagellation as some sort of reward to the world. The world doesn't care if you hurt yourself. That doesn't help the world out. It's better that you should do something to avoid the same mistake in the future in yourself and others. Cheers.